So the big question is this. We know spontaneous remissions and so-called miracle cures exist. We also know they aren't so spontaneous after all. I'm living proof of this, having cured my quote-unquote incurable illness. There's something to how this happens. So how do we, as humans with chronic symptoms, tap into this so-called miraculous healing capacity? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Dr. Erin Hayford, and welcome to the Sacred Illness Podcast. Before we begin today's episode, just my standard medical disclaimer. This podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only. The content should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional regarding any medical concerns. Hi everyone, Dr. Erin here. Welcome back to the Sacred Illness Podcast. I am interviewing Kimberly Sleeth, and today is part 2 of a 2-part interview. If you did not catch part 1, check out the previous episode, get up to date, and then come back here when you're ready. Okay, enjoy. I made this post a while ago on social media about so-called miracle cures, people who kind of like you. I mean, you kind of had that piece to your story because it's like the moment you started doing mindset work, things shifted, and like 2 weeks into my program, and so it's kind of like that question of what is it that allows some people to just shift? And like you said, it's not like it was immediate because it's been a long journey for you. But what I have seen, and I would love to hear from you if this resonates. It seems like when a person is just ready, like the body is just ready to let go. It's just ready to shift. It's just ready to, because like if there's part of you that was still like, nah, I kind of need sickness to like get what I need, it probably wouldn't shift that quickly. It would take more uprooting to like get rid of those other things. But it's like you got to this point of I'm done. This has to change. And so it's like everything in your body aligns. And once you find the thing that it's like the life raft, you're like, okay, I'm jumping, Does that make sense? Does that feel true for you?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think that even if I found this work 5 years ago, it would not have done anything. I don't think I was mentally ready. I feel like, and this won't be true for everyone, but for me personally, when I hit my 40s, and I've heard people talk about this, when you get into your 40s, you kind of stop caring so much about what other people think and all this kind of stuff. And I think that had something to do with it as well, because I think I was so stuck in this caring what everyone else thought of me and making sure that I was worthy of being loved. I was afraid of losing people. If I stood up to this, or if I argued with this or whatever, like, then they might think I'm rude and not want to be around anymore or whatever. Like, I stopped caring about that so much and being like, really? Like, other people do this. I can do this, And yes, I think I just hit a point where my burnout was so extreme. And I just suddenly realized that if I don't change something now at 43, I'm going to never live my life. Like, that started to scare me because that was already in my mind. Like, something has to change because I don't want this to be the way the rest of my life is. When I found the work and started doing it, it's almost like my body was like, yes, we're ready for this. We're ready to do something else now. And we don't have to live in survival mode anymore. Because that's what it was for 40 something years, survival mode all the time without even realizing it.
Yeah, I got a question from someone recently, as a person that I've been working with, that was like, how do you know if stress or like past, stuff is keeping you stuck and sick? Like, how do you know if that's contributing? And I think that's the thing that's so tricky, is like it's just how you live, right? Like, it's not like an obvious like, oh, I've shifted, and unless it's like a big stressor and you can like just feel, you can tell that you're like more stressed out or whatever. But generally speaking, if you are born into a world where there's just a lot of stress and chaos, or if you're sensitive, or like if feeling that intensity of being surrounded by intensity and chaos is just sort of the normal environment in which you are existing, you don't really have that experience of like, oh, I was really calm and life was really peaceful and good, and now I feel, like it's just like that's just how you are. And it's incredible to me that our bodies do so good at getting, moving along and staying somewhat intact, like you were still getting life, but obviously the quality of life was not where you wanted it to be. But like the fact that our bodies can still maintain, even though, it's basically like physiologically not functioning how it's supposed to, right? Like it's in survival
Right.
mode. Everything is shifted into survival. It's amazing we can survive for that many years, being in that state.
Yep.
But it's like, but then, like when we think about it that way, it's like, well, no wonder we have symptoms. Like if our body is physiologically ready to fight a bear or fight the tiger,
Mhm.
whatever it is, like every second of our lives, like we can't be in that state and not expect something to happen.
Yeah. And I think that was something that was hard for me too, is that people would tell me basically to use my logic, like, you're not in danger. There's nothing that you need to be anxious about or worried about. And so a lot of my experience growing up and even as an adult was you don't, dismissing my experiences as valid. Like, you shouldn't be scared, you shouldn't be worried. This isn't a problem, you're making it a problem. And so yeah, it's really hard when you're always in survival mode, but you don't know it and you don't know why you're always worried or anxious or whatever. And part of it's not just like an anxiety disorder. It's when you're highly sensitive, you just pick up on things that other people don't. And to them, it's not a threat because they don't even notice it in the first place, or they just don't think on it that much. But it's like breathing. I can't help it. It's, I see it, I smell it, I hear it. You can't take that away from me. Um, but to other people, it's frustrating because it adds this extra layer of, stress on their end of something to think about or worry about that they don't care about. And so it was just sort of like I was always kind of told to use my logic, right? And, I did try for a long time. I tried to become more logical and less emotional and whatever. And that's when I lost my intuition. Like, it was like, I'm going to research and I'm going to study and I'm going to use my logic and I'm going to whatever. And I became, well, it burned me out more because it's just, that's just not who I am. But I'm still kind of trying to get out of that, like trying to bring back the beauty that was my imagination and my intuition and my emotional connection and all those things. Being highly sensitive and or being stuck in a state of survival, um, when other people around you do not understand that situation, is really hard because they just think you should just use your logic and be like, there's nothing wrong, we're having a good time, this is a good day, whatever. And that actually makes things worse,
Yeah.
because now you feel bad about yourself and you don't know how to fix it.
100%.
So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this work is validation, right? Like validating your experience,
Yeah.
validating that there's always a reason for
Mhm.
something. And I think that's what frustrates me with doctors too, when they're like, it's just anxiety. It's like, okay, but why am I anxious? It's like a kid who's like, but why? But why? Like it's like
Mhm.
that's the kind of approach we need to have with this work or with our bodies, with our health, with our lives, is there's always a reason, there's always something deeper. And sure, maybe someone has anxiety, but what is making their system feel unsafe? What is making them feel like
Right.
there's a
Yeah.
threat present? And what's making them feel like there's a threat present constantly? It's not just like especially in cases with chronic anxiety, it's like, okay, there's something chronically keeping that system in a
Mhm.
state of survival. So what can we do to help that system let go? And anxiety is going to, of course, then cause physical symptoms, et cetera, whatever. So I think it's just that validation of, you feel this way for a reason, even if it is just in your head from from your brain thinking there's a threat. But
Yeah.
there's still a reason that threat got planted there in the first place. Like you said, it's not like
Mhm.
you dreamed up the tiger and then you chased yourself with the tiger. Like the tiger existed in the real world. There's
Yeah.
a reason your system, and all of us who have had chronic symptoms or have chronic symptoms, there was a real threat at some point in our lives, and sometimes there was
Mhm.
many of them. And our
Right.
nervous system is going to remember that because it is wired for survival. It's wired to keep us alive. And so it's going to say, okay, like that thing exists. We need to stay on edge or like stay alert until we know that threat is gone. And that's the whole thing with trauma, is that until we work it through our system and release it and like really let us ourselves know that that threat has passed, we're going to stay on that. We're going to stay walking on eggshells, right? We're going to be like ready to go.
Mhm.
And I think that's the problem with the approach of Western medicine and well-meaning family and friends, is like they're asking us to use logic. Like you said, it's like,
Yeah.
just don't like think a different thought or like have a different experience. And it's like, But that's
Mm-hmm.
not the part of my brain that's wired right now. That's not the part of my brain that's like in that survival mode. And we can't
Right.
get through that logical place. Hi everyone, Dr. Erin here. So by now you're starting to get an idea of some of what the sacred illness paradigm is all about. The sacred illness paradigm is all about this question of what is your illness inviting you to become? What is it that lies within each of us that allows some of us to acquire so-called spontaneous healing or remissions? And what is the key to unlocking that innate self-healing capacity in each and every one of us? The Sacred Illness Blueprint is something that I developed as a guide to help you walk through this process step by step to learn how to move deeper and deeper within yourself to find these layers of dysregulation, of trauma, of limiting beliefs, of things that you're holding within your system that are keeping you small, stuck, and sick. Ultimately, if we ignore the mind-body connection and are not exploring the ways in which our nervous system continues to be dysregulated or in a chronic state of activation and stress, any healing modality that we put into our body from the outside in is going to be less effective, if not effective at all. So if you are currently feeling stuck, lost, confused, or disillusioned in your healing journey, feeling like you have tried so many things, you have tried so many modalities, you have worked with so many providers, and you're just not seeing the results you want, know that this is normal, and of course you're not, because this foundational mind-body connection is often, if not always, missed in all of these modalities. And just like we can't build a house on top of sand, our healing cannot grow and blossom and be strong and successful if the foundation is not laid first. So rather than doing something different but similar to everything you have tried before and expecting different results, I encourage you to consider doing something different altogether. This is where I invite you to explore the Sacred Illness Group Coaching Program. This is a low-cost monthly membership option that I have created. It's constantly open, constantly enrolling, where you can begin to explore this completely different way of engaging in your health, in your body, in your illness, and in your healing process. What is provided inside this group coaching program is the blueprint that lays the foundation and lays the path out for you to follow to begin to explore these deeper aspects of health, to truly get at the root of what is causing your illness, and from there allowing all other modalities to blossom so that you can actually start to see the changes and the healing take place in your body that you have been expecting and wanting all along. If you're ready and want to learn more, head on over to aurorasomatic.com, and at the top of the screen, click on Group Coaching, where you can read all about it and become a member today. I can't wait to see you on the inside, and for now, let's get back to the podcast. It feels like the biggest limiting belief that you're kind of working with is just feeling like you're quote unquote normal, or like there's not anything wrong with you in the sense that you were thinking, like in the way that you were thinking. Does that feel true? Or have you, like, what would you say is like kind of the core belief that started it all, so to speak?
I think that's definitely it. I think that, as a child, my feelings weren't validated a lot. So even when I had a real feeling, like something that I should actually be worried about or that was normal to be worried about, especially for a child, it was often dismissed. And so I learned not to trust myself. And I learned that people did not want to deal with my feelings and emotions. And I would often, try to get loud, like crying, screaming, like tantrums and things like that to just get my feelings validated. I think for me, validation has been the biggest thing. And so I would often choose friendships and relationships and other things where I was chronically invalidated because that's what was normal for me. And I really truly believed that I was the not normal one and that everybody else is saying these things or denying my experience and reality because my reality was flawed. Like I'm the problem. And so that's been the theme of my life. And that is what I'm working on now. Just, and I've always been into psychology. I've always talked about emotions openly and freely. So it feels like I've been doing this work for so long, but really, I, I talk about it, I understand it, but I wasn't internalizing it and actually, using it and dealing with it. So, yeah, working on validation for myself, just validating myself and not making it about me when other people can't validate my situation or my feelings, has been the biggest thing for me. And I think that changes everything because I just really did not hold any of my own power. Everyone else held my power for me. And you can't, or I can't heal like that. Like I can take all the supplements, I can be the health person. Like I've been the health person for so long that I even had someone say to me in my family, like, well, if that stuff works, then why do you still have problems? And I made that about me. Like, oh well, see, that's why I can never be an herbalist because I'm not good enough to be one. I still have some issues. And so it means I won't be a good enough herbalist. Like I'm just, it's like imposter syndrome. Um, and so, yeah, like building my confidence in myself and validating myself sounds so simple. And like, you wouldn't think it would take 18 years to figure that out, but it really is. Things run so deep. You don't realize how much you're holding on to that's from other people and or how to get rid of it. Like it, that's why this work is so important because like people need this. I think especially sensitive people need this because we don't know how to extrapolate ourselves from others and their energy and what they're putting onto us.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, as you know, I think of this work as a reclamation of yourself, right? It's the path back to your authentic self. And for some of us, I mean, I feel like for so many of us, maybe even the majority of us, we don't really even know who that is fully because it started in childhood where we had to kind of shut down what was going on internally to focus on what was happening externally. And I think, like you're saying, especially for sensitive kids and people, because there's so much like overstimulation or so much happening outside of us. It's so
Oh
hard to be
yeah.
like, what is my experience versus just what am I feeling and intuiting from everyone happening or everything happening around me. And so
Right.
it is, yeah, and people, well, been asked before too, like, is there truly like a sense of self, or aren't we just like a construct of our environment? And
Mm.
I believe really firmly that there's a nature and a nurture, right? Like we
Mhm.
come into the world having a sense, a self. Like we have an innate personality, an innate way of showing up in the world that, like, if all external conditions were perfect, like this person would just blossom and be in the world. But of course we're always going
Right.
to be influenced by our environment. It's just the question of like, how much did we get influenced? How far off track are we? How not aligned are we to the point where it's actually causing like an inner tension and an inner turmoil because we're not experiencing our emotions, we're not expressing them, we're not living our life in this way that is communicating to our body that we're safe, that we're like, it's okay. If we are okay to be ourselves, if we are okay to express ourselves, then we're safe. And if for
Yeah.
some reason there's an innate intuitive whatever, like, thing happening in our body that we're keeping inside, then there's a communication of it's not safe to be yourself, and so therefore we need to shift into survival mode. And I think it's so, we think of trauma as, well, I mean, it started, we started with understanding that trauma was even a thing because of military PTSD. That's where it started. And then it
Yeah.
slowly has expanded, in our lifetime through understanding that it's so much more than that. And I think where we're at now is really understanding that childhood trauma, I think, I mean, honestly, again, I'm careful to not say things to extremes, but I feel like most of us have some form of it, and not in the sense that every parent is terrible and abusive. And it can be
Right.
simple as not being attuned to in a certain way, right? Like if we
Mhm.
are, like you said, if you're experiencing an emotion and your parents are like, stop having that emotion, because they can't handle it. And oftentimes
Right.
it's like anger or whatever. It's like, just be quiet, be a good girl, whatever, however we were raised. Like that's not overtly abusive, right? But
Huh.
it's still causing an issue in us. Like it's causing
Right.
a rift between our innate self. And so it's traumatic in the sense that it's shifting the way our nervous system functions, and therefore it's going to have an impact on our body. So I think that's kind of how I
Yeah.
think of trauma, is like anything that takes you away from yourself and makes you go into a state of survival is a trauma. And so
Right.
it's not being attuned to, it's not, it's just not feeling like there's a safe container for us to blossom within. Does that
Right.
resonate with kind of your experience as a child?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. And we have the conversation of nature versus nurture a lot because with 5 kids, we have three adult children now. and two still at, well, we have three still at home, but one's an adult, two moved out. But like, they're all so different. They're all so different. And like, I mean, especially with my younger two, because of some experiences I had with my older ones, like I tried to be very intentional about, you know, instilling certain things or responding in certain ways or whatever. And regardless of all that, they still did. I'll see a lot of things on social media like, if you do this with your kids, they will turn out like this. If
Mm-hmm.
you read to your kids this many books a week, they'll love to read. Well, I can say for a fact that's not true. Like, it depends on the kid. Like, they are who they are, and then like how they respond. One thing that I did as a parent traumatized one child while the other child was like, I don't even like, that was nothing. Like, they're all so different. And I'm not going to name names, but like some people that I know, like one sibling says their childhood was great, they loved every minute of it, only remembers the good things, whatever. And there's another one who still needs therapy constantly, like, and has a horrible memories, that, and it's just, we're all born a certain way. And so we absorb things differently. And so that's why it's hard to say that someone didn't have trauma, because it really depends on how things affect you too.
My little one is 6 weeks old, and I can already tell a huge difference between him and my firstborn. Like, and he's a
Yeah.
baby, it's just like I can just feel that his energy and his like little being is just different, and
Yeah.
I often will joke, which is not really a joke, but I'm like, I know they're gonna end up in therapy no matter what I do, right? Like,
Yeah.
because I
It's
mean,
true.
yeah, it's like we can't be the perfect parent for the child that like is growing in front of us, and we're getting to know them as
Hmm.
I think we do our best, and trying to like meet basic needs and that sort of thing, but like in general it is hard. Basically the way I think of it is like our modern brain is not meant for, or our, I should say, our ancient brain has not caught up to the modern world, right? Like our brains are still evolving to catch up to the craziness of life as it is, and the fact that we have these really developed brains doesn't negate the fact that they're still like this animalistic response and animalistic needs. And so we're here trying to balance like the modern stuff with the like the basic needs stuff, and it's a lot. It's a lot to have to
Yeah.
do all at the same time all the time. So I think in general a lot of people I work with will say, I had a great childhood. I have wonderful parents, like nothing, and that is absolutely true. And this is not about like throwing mom and dad under the bus, because like we're parents and we're here to say, like, we know we messed up, even
Yeah.
though we love our kids and we're doing our best. It doesn't have to, again, it's not like, I think we need to divorce ourselves from this idea that trauma is like, like physical abuse, like really overt kind of forms of abuse.
Yeah.
Obviously that is trauma too, and there's a lot of that, unfortunately. And
Hmm.
it can also be more subtle. And so this is not about demonizing parents or like erasing your good childhood memories. It's about validating why your body's wired a certain way, and just
Right.
helping you to work through those memories, like basically working with your inner child and saying like, yes, all things were, these things were all really great, and it's okay that you needed or wanted more in this moment. Like you said,
Right.
those caregivers you had for that moment of just being really attuned and holding you, and like that's a lot of the work we do in the program, is going back and giving
Hmm.
your inner child those things that they needed. And obviously we can't rewrite history, but we can rewire your nervous system. And so when you go back and have those experiences of like, yeah, when I was mad at my sister and I was sent to my room, what I really needed was to be able to like express my anger and tell my sister
Right.
she made me upset. And those little attunements or those little tweaks, right, to the story make a huge difference, because it's so validating, and it's saying, this is what it feels like to express your anger, this is why your anger was valid, this is how it feels to be validated in that expression of yourself. And I can't even tell you how quickly I see in sessions, like even just one little micro story like that of, feeling your anger and getting mad at your sister, in this past experience you had, can bring so much relief. And people will
Yeah.
like, next session come in and say like, yeah, I just feel like a burden has been lifted and I feel so much more empowered. Like you were saying, like it's empowering and it's taking your power back. And it's just really, I think when it comes down to it, it's just validating the human experience and making space for all of it, right? Like making space
Mhm.
for the messiness that it is to be a person, and recognizing there's no right way to show up in the world. It's okay that we as sensitive people go to a party and are like super overwhelmed or noticed like
Yeah.
all 20 things, and our partner was like, oh, the food was good, you know, like there's like
Yeah, yeah.
the experiences are can be so different. And
Yep.
so it's just making space for all of it, and meeting ourselves as best we can, because other people can't always meet us where we need to be met, but at least we can do that for ourselves, and then from there we can
Right.
be more attuned to, like, based on me knowing myself and allowing myself to show up in the world in this certain way, what do I need, who do I need to surround myself with, it kind of goes out from there. Versus, I think, you kind of spoke to this, and I think in general it can be trauma makes us focus on the outside in, like we're trying to control the environment, or we're selecting
Yes.
people based on past traumas. Whereas if we start to go within, then it's like, okay, I feel good, and now I can choose, the outside based on my inside, not try to make the outside validate my inside, if that makes sense.
One of the things that I dealt with was once all this stuff started coming out about trauma, about how you raise kids, because, I don't know about you, but I was raised during a time where, spanking and other forms of things like that were normal and okay. And timeouts and yelling. I mean, it was all normal and fine. And everybody went through that, right? Like you weren't hurting your kids by doing that. But then this stuff started to come out. And so it was like, oh, okay. Um, I need to be different. And I ran with it. I was like, okay, gentle parenting, like this is what I'm gonna do. And it it became a huge focus of mine. And I became very intentional and I tried really hard. And then I feel like I made some mistakes, along the way and stuff like that. And when my two older kids had mentioned some of those mistakes, I took it really hard, as a highly sensitive person and stuff like that. And there's some deeper issues there, but the point is that I took it all on upon myself. Like I had screwed up as a parent completely. Like my whole life's purpose was over. Like, and I still had these other kids to raise. And I like became a perfectionist in raising them in the least traumatic way possible. Like I wanted to make it to where they would have nothing that they needed therapy for and all this kind of stuff. And it became like an obsession that was hurting me a
Mm,
lot and enabling them. Like I was afraid to tell them to do chores. I was afraid to basically, I was afraid to do anything that would cause them pain or upset with me.
mhm,
And I just kind of wanted to put a word in there to other parents who may be highly sensitive or have more perfectionist tendencies to not do that. Like to realize that your kids are going to have feelings that aren't always positive towards you. They're going to have, you're not going to be able to do everything right. You can't prevent any trauma or any negative, feelings there, and you cannot give them a perfect childhood. And so trying to do that really, really, really burned me out. And I just don't want other parents to to go through the same thing. Like it's important to be intentional with your parenting, and I think gentle parenting is wonderful, and being trauma informed and all these things is very important. But to take it to the extreme isn't healthy for yourself or your kids, and it can actually be like harmful to you and maybe even them. Like it's just, I think just trying your best is what's important. So
I agree with that. I appreciate you saying that, because yeah, I'm in the thick of it right now with a 3-year-old and a newborn, like with like, trying to get those nervous systems in working order, or making
yeah.
them. And I think the most helpful thing that I have read, because it is a struggle. If you ever want your resiliency and your regulated nervous system to be tested, like raise kids, and then
Yes.
like
Oh
it
my
is the
gosh.
test of all tests. And like I've been humbled, like as someone who does this work, like, I'm not saying I'm cocky about it, but like I'm like, I get it. I understand it. This is what I do.
Yeah.
I help people with this. And then I have kids and I'm like, holy moly, like I am okay, like back to square one, right? But I think the most helpful thing that I have read that has really validated things for me is stuff like that, which is like basically you're going to mess up and don't try to be perfect.
Yeah.
And that the repair is like the most important part
Mm.
because that is life. Like, you know, and I was raised by, but I think my mom is highly sensitive. She's still alive, so I should have her like do a little quiz. But I'm pretty sure, you know, based on kind of like the way that I understand myself and like what you're saying, it just like because she tried to do that, like have this perfect hit, like childhood things really calm, things really easy. Like she would
Yeah.
basically, she was like the sponge of like the crap in life, right? Like she would
Yes.
take all of the burden away, and so that was great, right? Like, you know, it was like a lovely childhood. Everything was taken care of in that regard. There was obviously like I got sick for a reason, but that was not the reason.
Right. Yeah.
And so, but like part of that was like never being told no, right? Like never being uncomfortable. And so I had like bad boundaries and I didn't know how to say no to others. Like I basically became a people pleaser because of that modeling, right? So there was like
Mm.
a downside to that. But the repair part is, you know, when you mess up, coming back around and apologizing to your child and saying, I'm so sorry I did that. You know, I should not have yelled. That was not appropriate. I love you so much. You know, like whatever that is, because
Yeah.
that is what, when I'm working with people and they are having, like, let's say they have IBS, right? Like, let's say they have a gut issue. We're working with that symptom and a memory comes up of like a time where, okay, actually, this is a real example. There was a story where a parent like hit their child, right? Like she was yelling at the sister, and the patient that I was working with tried to protect her sister from getting yelled at, and the mom turned and slapped her. And so we worked with that memory, and what she needed, she was like, I don't even really think I needed her to not hit me. What I needed was for her to say like, oh my God, I'm so sorry I did that. Like I feel out of control right now. I'm so upset. I should not be yelling at you girls. I love you. You know, like that's what she needed.
Mhm.
And so like it's not even, you can do things like hit, you know, like which is as bad as it can get for some of us with our parents, and still like the thing the kid needs is just for you to apologize and like
Yeah.
come back down to their level and just like be a human about it, right? Because
Mhm.
so much of what happens is like there's a hit and then nothing, right? Like it's just left at that, and then
Right.
mom calms down eventually and pretends like everything is fine, but meanwhile it's too late for us, like our body has absorbed this thing. And so repair is the name of the game. So I think part of what that is too is it's acknowledging like life is hard. We're going to have stressors, we're going to face challenges, we're going to have crappy situations and fights and discomfort.
Yeah.
So like you're saying, like trying to make it perfect and safe and, you know, without anything, any challenges is going to, it's kind of like telling that nervous system like, you know, this is what life is, and then when stress happens they're like, what do I do? I don't know how to manage.
Right.
So the repair work is showing how to basically handle that. And that's what really helps our nervous system is to regulate, because it's like I saw mom get mad, I saw her have a reaction, I saw her come down and apologize, and like, you know, that co-regulation thing is really what it's all about. So sounds like that's kind of what you're coming around to with like, you know, just learning through parenting is that
Mhm.
repair is what it's all about. Have you seen that with your own kids, like how that piece is important?
Yes. So one thing I'm really intentional about is telling them about my moods and emotions.
Mm,
So I want them to know that it's normal and okay to feel things. Like it's what you do with those feelings that can be not okay. So for example, when I'm angry and irritated, I'm not going to hit things or whatever. I may be moody, but then I will tell them, I'm sorry, I'm really moody today. I didn't get enough sleep. I'm open with them about
yeah.
what's going on with me because I feel like for them that is really important. I haven't had like actually in the past few years, I haven't had to do a lot of repair work. They're older and like I'm good at telling them when things are going on and we're not, so there hasn't been a whole lot of repair work needed. And, to be honest, when my older three were younger, um, that wasn't even heard of.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, it's a
I,
newer
I
thing.
was parenting the way that my generation was parented, like there was no social media to share this stuff. So
There's been, for our generation, there was there, and all previous generations, there was that mindset of like, they're kids, they don't know anything, we're the adult, we know best, so
Yes.
just listen to me, right? Like that was kind of the mentality. And I think especially as sensitive kids, we know viscerally,
Yeah.
like it's not true. Like you pick up on so much as a child. You
Mhm.
understand, and you may not have the correct, like the adult understanding of it, but you can sense, when stuff is off, obviously. And so having that experience, being told having your parent tell you like, I didn't sleep enough, this is, I'm hungry, or like I'm
Mhm.
just overwhelmed, like it's so important, because you're also giving your kids language for when they
Yeah.
feel that way. Like, okay, this is, there's a reason there's discomfort in my body, like what do I need? It's basically keeping you in touch with your needs.
Mhm.
And I think the biggest thing that, the biggest thing that's happening in childhood trauma is what we talked about today, where there's this rift between who you are and who you think you're supposed to be. Like this, I'm not okay, right? Like I'm not
Yeah.
okay, I think, is like kind of the foundation of all these limiting beliefs. Like there's something wrong with me, I'm not good enough, I can't, yeah, like there's something different, like I'm the black sheep, there's something really different about me, or I'm not smart enough, or whatever. There's always this like not enough, something wrong, something not okay. And that is usually coming from when our parents are having this big thing happening and this big emotion, or they're getting mad at us or something. Like children are naturally narcissistic. Like we think the world is a reflection of us. And
Right.
so if mom is mad, it's something about me. If this
Mhm.
bad thing is happening, it's something about me, right? And so that's where if like mom and dad model owning it, like I didn't sleep, that's why I'm acting this way. It's not because you're
Right.
a bad child and there's something foundationally wrong with you. So this
Mhm.
is, as parents, this is what we mean, or that, as humans, this is what we mean by cycle breaking, right? Because we're breaking how our parents raised us. And then also, this is how we reparent our inner child. We go back and we say, what did we really need to hear? What did we really need in that moment that we didn't get, to like basically reconfirm that we're okay, that we're safe, that our feelings are valid, etc. So I
Yeah.
appreciate this parenting talk, because I've been thinking so much about how, yeah, like, basically I think of this work as like it's inner child work. It's reparenting our inner child,
Yeah.
and I'm living it in real time with my own kids, which is like very stressful. It just feels like
It
there's so
is.
much pressure on it, but I really appreciate
Mhm.
what you said. I feel like you were talking to me of like, try not to be perfect, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Sacred Illness listeners, Dr. Erin here. I'm quickly interrupting today's episode to put out the invitation to you or anyone you know who has a chronic illness or chronic symptoms that would like to come onto the podcast and share your story. Our goal is to invite folks onto the show who have worked with mind-body medicine modalities and noticed an improvement or even a complete resolution of symptoms using this potent medicine. If this describes you, check the link in the show notes below that will take you to a quick application to fill out that will give us some information about who you are, what your story is, and we'll take it from there. And again, if you know anyone who might also fit this description or like to come onto our show, please feel free to share the link with them as well. All right, let's get back to the episode. One more thing I want to touch on before we wrap up today is just, again, the power of when you're ready to shift, things will shift. Like the IBS story is just really powerful, how your body just shifted and like released and opened and things started moving, and like
Yeah.
basically like things came back online. And I think
Mhm.
that's what I really want people to hear is this work takes time, and it takes time for all of these limiting beliefs and all of these ways in which we don't feel safe in the world to feel ready. And if you are not seeing things shift in your physical symptoms, it's okay, right? Because that just means there's some part of you that's still not feeling totally safe, right? There's some
Right.
story or some, like we're just talking about, like there's some experience where it's like, I'm not fully feeling ready to be safe in the world and to show up in certain ways. And I think some of us, it's not like there's this like place of perfection where we have no limiting beliefs and we feel totally safe. But I think
Yeah.
it's like a seesaw, right? Where it's like we feel safe enough to where things can start to shift for us. And sometimes it's
Yeah.
dramatic, like you experienced, and sometimes it's not.
Also, I think probably a lot of people will deal with this is that there was the big shift and then things changed a lot. And then, like I said, I had a mild episode, like really mild, but it was enough for my brain to go, oh no, it's
Mm,
coming back. I'm not healed. This isn't going to work. That mindset just kind of going out of control. And I, redirected and, I said to myself, you know what? No, that, first of all, this is, kind of using some logic. This is a very mild episode. Normally, it would be much worse than this. So things have gotten better. And then I would tell myself, we're getting healthy. We're repairing. We're working on this. We're still working out the kinks. Like, just reminding myself that it's a process and it's not just going to be like, oh my gosh, you're totally healed and now you can move on with your life. Like, I'm going to have to keep doing this work and regulating my system. And, to be honest, when I had the mild episode for 2 days before, I had been kind of stuck in this loop of overthinking and worrying about several situations. And I also had a stressful encounter. And like, even though I didn't feel like those were affecting me, they absolutely were. Now that I can actually step back and look at things, it's like noticing that, because I've been an overthinker my entire life, connecting the dots to, oh my gosh, when I was having no symptoms pretty much, I wasn't overthinking. I was living in the moment. I was starting to enjoy my life, etc. But these past couple of days, I've been ruminating, and now my body is responding to that. And so, being able to make that connection was important. And so, I think that if people who are going to be doing this work can realize that there's going to be ups and downs, and it's going to be you're going to have to take a look at what might be going on and start to connect the dots, and things will continue to get better. So it was a big shift, but it's going to be continued work, which I'm happy about, because it doesn't just mean that my physical symptoms are going to be better. It means that, like, I can show up in a different way in the world entirely. I can be a totally different and happier person. And that's right there is enough. Like, that's better than anything else. So
I think that's really, like, I want to drive that message home over and over and over again to people. It's like the point of this isn't to like get back to life, right? Like, we're not trying to like just get over the illness so we can get back to the rat race and get back to stress.
right.
This is a shift, and there is that, like, well, first of all, what you just highlighted is, again, like, nothing is happening for no reason, which again is terrible English, but like, there's a reason you had a little bit of a flare up, right? And now, it can be, yes, it's startling, and it can be like, oh crap, like it's coming back, which I think is more that old fear stuff, like that's more that rhetoric of like, this is incurable, or you're, whatever, which makes sense because that's the world we kind of live in. But then
Yeah.
once you can ground yourself in what you know and what you've been experiencing, it's more like, okay, how can I connect? Like, what's happening? Kind of take a step back, tune in, what's been happening in my life. That's what I always ask people, like, what was going on right around the time this all started, or like, what led up to it, or whatever, what was the straw that like kind of broke the camel's back, so to speak. But that's where you really see symptoms as a conversation. They're communicating to you like, hey, pause for a second, right? Like, you're getting back into more of a survival way of being, and like, can you like shift out of that? So in that way, we can have a relationship with our symptoms that is more conversational versus adversarial of like, crap, what do I need to do to get you to go away? It's more like, thank you for reminding me to slow down and breathe, and to like let go, or whatever we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why this work is empowering, because it's giving you your power back. This isn't random violence against you, right? Your symptoms
Yeah.
aren't just like randomly happening. There's
Right.
and it's actually, like you said, it's actually like a positive thing, which I know is a hard pill to swallow for folks who are in the thick of it. Like, it's hard to think of this as positive, but it's really trying to get you to shift into a way of being that is more conducive to life, right? To feeling
Yeah.
better in your body. And yeah, this is an ongoing, it's a new way of being, right? Like, you're learning a new way to show up in the world and to show up in your body and in your life. And it does take ongoing concerted effort. I think it starts to get easier as it becomes more normal, but then,
Yeah.
life is life, and things are always going to get thrown at us. And like I said, with having kids, like, I feel like I'm thrown right back into stuff, and I'm like, okay, starting over again. So I
Yeah.
think life is always going to give us things that are going to challenge us. And so just the more we can like build that foundation of how to stay in our bodies, stay in relationship with ourselves and our needs and our feelings, and having skills and having things in place that we can use to keep, as regulated as we can. And just,
Yeah.
one more reminder that I always say is, regulation means we're still going to feel stress, but it's, how do we feel it and not get stuck there? How do we not ruminate? How do we not just grow the anthill into a mountain or a molehill or whatever, the smaller hill?
Mm-hmm.
How do we not let it explode and stay there? Like, how can we get into the activation that is necessary for the stressor we're experiencing, and then come back down again, so that our body knows the threat has passed, we're safe, and we can let go. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Sacred Illness Podcast. If you find this information shared here inspirational and educational, please share it with those you think would benefit from this work. To take this work deeper yourself, check out our website, www.aurorasomatic.com, where you can explore our coaching, community, and course options. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel where new content is coming out all the time, intended to inspire, awaken, and help you deepen your relationship with yourself, your life, and your world. We'll see you next time.